The sound of the shop's door creaking open barely registered over the hum of the city, but for me, every detail mattered. The clink of the bell, the shuffle of shoes on the worn wooden floor, and the murmur of voices all blended into the background noise that had become my life. The little flower shop was my sanctuary, my cage, and the only place where I could escape the suffocating weight of the neighborhood outside. Every day was the same, filled with the same faces, the same struggles, and the same overwhelming sense of hopelessness. The neighborhood was a place where dreams went to die. The streets were cracked and crumbling, the buildings leaning precariously as if they, too, were on the verge of giving up. It was a place where the future seemed more like a distant memory than a possibility. My family had been here for generations, rooted in this place that seemed to swallow up any hope of a better life. I had grown up watching the people around me struggle, fight, and fail. It was as if the very air here was thick with despair, and no matter how hard you tried to breathe, it always left you gasping for something more. But that wasn't what scared me the most. It wasn't the crime, the poverty, or the hopelessness that kept me up at night. It was the feeling that I was stuck, that I was just another cog in the machine, destined to live out my days in this forgotten corner of the world. I worked at the flower shop because it was the only job I could get. My father had run the shop before me, and his father before him. It was the family business, though calling it a business felt like a cruel joke. The few customers we had were either too poor to buy anything or too desperate to care about flowers. Yet, I found a strange comfort in the routine of it all. The smell of fresh flowers mixed with the musty scent of the old building was familiar, almost soothing. Arranging the flowers, trimming the stems, and watering the plants gave me something to focus on, something to keep my mind occupied. But no matter how many bouquets I made, how many arrangements I put together, the emptiness in my chest never seemed to go away. It was like a black hole, constantly pulling me down into the darkness. The robbers were a constant threat, a reminder that even in a place as broken as this, things could always get worse. They were ruthless, taking what they wanted without a second thought. The shop had been robbed more times than I could count, and each time it happened, I felt a little more of myself slip away. The fear of what they might do next was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. I had learned to live with it, to push it down and focus on the things I could control. But the truth was, I was terrified. Terrified that one day, they would take more than just the money from the register. That they would take away the last shred of hope I had left. I had tried to save up money to leave, to get out of this place and start fresh somewhere else. But every time I thought I was getting close, something would happen. The car would break down, a bill would come due, or the shop would be robbed again. It was like the universe was conspiring against me, keeping me trapped in this cycle of despair. I had almost given up, resigned myself to the fact that this was my life and there was nothing I could do to change it. But then something changed. It started with a late-night internet search, one of those desperate moments where you're willing to try anything, no matter how ridiculous it seems. I had heard about manifestation before, but I had always dismissed it as nonsense. The idea that you could change your reality just by thinking differently seemed too good to be true. But I was desperate, and desperation has a way of making you believe in things you never thought possible. I started small, just trying to manifest little things. A good day at work, a kind customer, anything that would make life a little more bearable. At first, nothing happened. It felt like I was just fooling myself, pretending that things were getting better when they clearly weren't. But I kept at it, mostly because I didn't have anything else. I would spend my breaks in the back of the shop, sitting on an overturned crate with my eyes closed, imagining a better life. I pictured myself living somewhere else, somewhere safe and quiet, where I could be happy. I imagined having enough money to leave, to start over, and build a life that wasn't defined by fear and loss. I didn't expect anything to come of it. It was just a way to pass the time, to distract myself from the reality of my situation. But then, slowly, things started to change. It was small at first, almost imperceptible. A kind word from a customer, a day without any trouble, a feeling of lightness that I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me think that maybe, just maybe, there was something to this manifestation thing after all. The breakthrough came on a day that started like any other. I was in the shop, arranging a bouquet of roses, when a group of people came in. They were different from the usual customers, well-dressed and confident, with an air of excitement about them. They told me they were part of a traveling group, passing through the town on their way to the next destination. They needed flowers for an event they were holding that night, and they wanted something special, something that would leave an impression. As I worked on their order, we started talking. They asked me about the town, the shop, and my life. For some reason, I found myself opening up to them in a way I hadn't with anyone else. I told them about my dreams of leaving, of finding a better life somewhere else. They listened, really listened, and when I was done, they invited me to join them on their journey. At first, I couldn't believe it. It seemed too good to be true, like one of those stories you hear about but never actually happens to you. But they were serious. They saw something in me, something I had almost forgotten was there. They told me that they could see the passion I had for life, the desire to make something more of myself. They believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. I didn't have much to pack, just a few clothes and some personal items. The hardest part was leaving the shop. It had been my home for so long, the only place where I felt safe. But I knew that staying there would mean giving up on my dreams, and I couldn't do that. Not anymore. So I locked the door one last time, left the key under the mat for the next owner, and walked away. The journey was like nothing I had ever experienced before. We traveled from town to town, meeting new people, seeing new places, and living a life that I had only ever dreamed of. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt free. The fear that had been a constant presence in my life was gone, replaced by a sense of possibility. I could be anything, do anything, and the world was full of opportunities just waiting for me to reach out and take them. The group became my new family, the people I had always been searching for. They supported me, encouraged me, and helped me see the potential I had buried deep inside. I learned so much from them, not just about the world, but about myself. I learned that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for, that I could overcome the obstacles in my life if I just believed in myself. The day we arrived in the small town that would become my new home was one of the happiest days of my life. It was everything I had ever wanted, a place where I could start over and build a life that was truly mine. The people there welcomed me with open arms, and I felt like I had finally found the place where I belonged. I found work at a local shop, similar to the flower shop I had left behind, but different in so many ways. The people there were kind, supportive, and genuinely cared about me. They didn't see me as just another worker, but as someone with dreams and aspirations. They encouraged me to pursue my passions, to keep growing and learning. And so I did. I threw myself into my new life with everything I had. I worked hard, saved up money, and started planning for the future. I knew that I wanted to stay in this town, to make it my home, and I was determined to make that happen. I found a small house on the outskirts of town, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I filled it with flowers, just like the shop, and it became my sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe. The group moved on after a while, continuing their journey to new places and new adventures. I was sad to see them go, but I knew that I had found my place. They had given me the gift of a new life, and I was determined to make the most of it. We kept in touch, sending letters and postcards from the places they visited, and I knew that I would always have a place with them if I ever needed it. But I didn't need it. For the first time in my life, I felt truly at home. The fear and despair that had once consumed me were gone, replaced by a sense of peace and contentment. I had found my purpose, my place in the world, and I knew that I could face whatever challenges came my way. The town became my family, the people my friends, and the life I had always dreamed of was finally mine. I woke up every morning with a sense of purpose, something I had never felt before. The shop where I worked became more than just a job. It was a place where I could connect with people, share stories, and bring a little bit of beauty into their lives. Each bouquet I made, each arrangement I put together, felt like a piece of art, something that could brighten someone's day, even if just for a moment. As the months passed, I became more involved in the community. I started volunteering at local events, helping out at the town's small but vibrant farmers market, and getting to know the people who lived there. They were kind, generous, and always ready to lend a hand when needed. It was a stark contrast to the neighborhood I had left behind, where everyone was out for themselves, and trust was a rare commodity. One day, while I was working at the shop, a young girl came in with her mother. She was shy, hiding behind her mother's skirt, but her eyes lit up when she saw the flowers. I crouched down to her level and asked her what her favorite flower was. She peeked out, her big brown eyes full of curiosity, and pointed to a bunch of daisies. I smiled and handed her one, watching as she clutched it in her small hands, a grin spreading across her face. Moments like that made all the hard work worth it. It was in those small interactions that I found joy and meaning. I realized that it wasn't just about selling flowers. It was about connecting with people, making them feel seen and valued. It was about being part of something bigger than myself, something that brought people together and made them feel like they belonged. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough. The money I earned at the shop was modest, but I managed to save a little each month, slowly building up a nest egg for the future. I didn't have grand plans or big dreams anymore. I had learned to appreciate the simple things in life, the moments of peace and contentment that came from being surrounded by good people and doing work that I loved. One evening, as I was closing up the shop, an elderly man came in. His clothes were worn, his face lined with age, but his eyes were bright and full of life. He introduced himself as Mr. Thompson, a long-time resident of the town. We chatted for a while, and he told me stories about the town's history, about the people who had lived there and the changes that had come over the years. I listened intently, fascinated by the rich history of the place I now called home. As we talked, I mentioned my interest in growing flowers, and Mr. Thompson's face lit up. He told me that he had a small garden at his home, a place where he had spent countless hours tending to plants and flowers over the years. He invited me to come by and see it sometime, and I eagerly accepted. The next weekend, I visited Mr. Thompson's home. His garden was a beautiful, sprawling oasis, filled with vibrant colors and the sweet scent of blooming flowers. He showed me around, pointing out different plants and sharing tips on how to care for them. It was clear that this garden was his pride and joy, a labor of love that he had cultivated over many years. Over the next few months, I spent more and more time at Mr. Thompson's garden. He became a mentor to me, teaching me everything he knew about gardening and plant care. Under his guidance, I started my own small garden at home, experimenting with different flowers and plants. It was a slow process, but it was incredibly rewarding. Watching something grow from a tiny seed into a beautiful flower was a reminder of how far I had come, of the life I had built for myself. The garden became my sanctuary, a place where I could escape from the world and lose myself in the simple joy of nurturing life. It was in that garden that I truly began to heal, to let go of the pain and fear that had haunted me for so long. The more I worked in the garden, the more I felt connected to the earth, to the cycles of life and death, growth and decay. It was a humbling experience, one that taught me to appreciate the beauty in imperfection, in the inevitable changes that life brings. Mr. Thompson and I became close friends. He would often invite me over for tea, and we would sit in his garden, talking for hours about life, love, and everything in between. He shared stories from his youth, tales of adventure and heartbreak, of the love he had lost and the life he had built after. His wisdom and kindness were a balm to my soul, and I was grateful for his friendship. One day, as we were sitting in the garden, Mr. Thompson handed me a small, weathered book. It was a journal, filled with notes and sketches from his years of gardening. He told me that he wanted me to have it, that it was time to pass on what he had learned to someone who would appreciate it as much as he had. I was deeply touched by the gesture, and I promised him that I would cherish it and continue to learn from it. As the seasons changed, so did my garden. It grew and flourished, becoming a vibrant part of my home. People in the town started to take notice, and I found myself becoming known as the flower guy. It was a small thing, but it brought me a sense of pride and belonging that I had never felt before. I started offering gardening advice to anyone who asked, sharing the knowledge that Mr. Thompson had passed on to me. Life in the town was peaceful, and I found myself settling into a routine that felt natural and right. The fear and uncertainty that had once plagued me were gone, replaced by a deep sense of contentment. I had found my place in the world, a place where I could be myself and thrive. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. One day, a young woman walked into the shop. She was looking for flowers for her sister's wedding, and we spent a long time discussing different options. There was something about her, a warmth and kindness that drew me in. We started talking, and before I knew it, we had been chatting for over an hour. Her name was Emily, and she had just moved to the town to start a new job. Over the next few weeks, Emily became a regular customer at the shop. We would talk every time she came in, and I found myself looking forward to her visits. There was a connection between us, something that felt easy and natural, like we had known each other for years. It wasn't long before we started spending time together outside of the shop, going for walks, having coffee, and exploring the town. Our friendship grew, and so did my feelings for her. But I was hesitant to say anything, afraid of ruining what we had. I had never been good at relationships, and the fear of getting hurt again held me back. But Emily was patient and kind, and eventually, I found the courage to tell her how I felt. To my surprise and relief, she felt the same way. We started dating, and our relationship quickly became something special. Emily brought out the best in me, encouraging me to pursue my passions and supporting me in everything I did. She was my rock, my partner, and my best friend. As our relationship deepened, we started talking about the future. Emily loved the town as much as I did, and we both knew that this was where we wanted to build our life together. We talked about getting married, buying a house, and maybe even starting a family someday. It was a future that I had never dared to dream of, but now it felt within reach. One evening, as we were sitting in my garden, Emily turned to me with a smile. "You know," she said, This garden is where I first knew I loved you." I looked at her, surprised. "Really? Why here?" "Because this garden is a reflection of you," she said, her eyes soft with affection. "It's beautiful, nurturing, and full of life. It's a place where everything can grow and thrive, just like you." I knew that anyone who could create something like this had a heart worth loving. Her words touched me deeply, and in that moment, I realized how much I had grown, not just as a gardener, but as a person. The scared, hopeless man who had once been trapped in a life of fear and despair was gone, replaced by someone who was strong, capable, and loved. It was a transformation that I never could have imagined, but it was real, and it was mine. As the years passed, Emily and I built a life together that was full of love, joy, and adventure. We got married in the garden, surrounded by friends and family, and it was the happiest day of my life. We bought a house on the edge of town, with plenty of space for our growing garden, and we spent our days working, laughing, and dreaming of the future. Mr. Thompson passed away peacefully in his sleep not long after our wedding. It was a sad day, but I knew that he had lived a full and happy life. I took over his garden, tending to it with the same care and love that he had shown. It became a place of remembrance, a tribute to the man who had helped me find my way. Life wasn't always easy, but it was good. I had everything I had ever wanted: a loving partner, a home, a community, and a sense of purpose. The struggles and hardships of my past felt like distant memories, reminders of how far I had come and how much I had grown.